everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the second of our virtual coffee for confined yogis. We are a global community of yogis looking for ways to use the tools of our yoga in this difficult time of global pandemic. We have 2 more virtual coffees scheduled for next month. My hope is that we will hear different voices and learn from each other how to maintain, to deepen, to strengthen our yoga practice, our sadhana in this period of confinement of illness. The main theme for this coffee, this virtual coffee, is how do we live our yoga in this time of confinement? How and why our sadhana practice in its many forms is even more important in these difficult times, these dark and uncertain times. So today, our guest is Karin Stephan, the co-founder of the first Iyengar Center in the East Coast. Karin took a first class with Pattabhi Jois and B.K.S. Iyengar in 1968 when she went to India. From 1972 and on, Karin studied with B.K.S. Iyengar, first in Paris and where she was located at the time, and then in Pune. Karin is a writer and has been teaching yoga for 49 years. In her many essays, she writes about yoga in relation to many Western great thinkers. Her work intertwines yoga's ideas with other vision and philosophy of life. She is known for the use of literary motif in her teaching. Karin draws on the art, literature, visual art to offer yoga practices that touch body, mind, and soul. Karin was one of my first Iyengar yoga teacher when I moved to Boston. And I was struck by her generosity of spirit and her interest in philosophy, and those were inspirational to me. I am so happy and grateful that she's agreed to be our guest today. Before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping. Let me say that we will allocate time toward the end of our session for your question. If you want to ask a question, please raise your virtual hand. It's located at the left-hand side of your screen under participant. Click on the icon and you will see the virtual hand. We will then randomly choose questions and then we will spotlight you so you can ask it. So with no further ado, let's welcome Karin. So Karin, you have known Mr. Iyengar since the late 60s. He was your teacher and he had a soft spot for you, I was told. Can you tell us one memory that you cherish about your relationship with Mr. Iyengar?
Just one memory?
One memory. Yeah.
Well, it's hard to narrow it down now. I think the most valuable memory that I want to share is because I want to share it with everybody else too. I was in India in 1976, I believe, and I was helping Gita Iyengar. I was helping type her book up, Yoga Gem for Women.
Yeah.
And I was doing that in exchange for classes, etc. Anyway, he wanted me to come upstairs and not keep typing, so I did. I followed what he said. And at the end of that course, I went to his house, and Gita was there, and Mr. Iyengar was there, and I wanted to thank him and say goodbye to him. And I already understood at that point that he had perceived a little bit what my personality was about. I could tell, just the way he was with me, I could tell that he understood that I was someone who was a bit of a brooder, but also a thinker. And anyway, he said this, and it has changed my life. I look at it almost every day. He said, just make your yoga consistent, and all obstacles can be overcome, even the most difficult. And he said it was such a fatherly way and such a feeling that he got me, and he wanted to make sure I understood that, which I did. And to this day, I follow that dictum. And I say, the obstacles that I'm feeling this morning, if I practice, will be overcome by the end of the day. So I just, It's not a very colorful story, and I have lots of wonderful colorful stories, but I think that's the most important for for all of you who are listening.
Great, thank you. No, this is a wonderful story, and maybe we'll tell more stories as we go. And that brings me to the main question of what we are doing today. In these dark times, when a pandemic is killing many people around us, how should we practice? So practice is important. Do the practice, and then things will come. But what is it? How should we practice in this time?
As a teacher or as a student, how would you like to, what perspective would you like me to come from?
So first as a student, I think.
First as a student.
Yeah.
Well, all I can say is that the practice of yoga creates structure in our lives, right? And this is a time where things are unstructured. It's so easy to get up out of bed and start work. You haven't changed your clothes, you haven't, you just, and everything sort of falls into everything else. That's a mistake. I think the mat should always be out where you're going to practice. That's my point of view. But I think we should follow a similar day-to-day pattern. We get up, we have tea, we change our clothes for practice, etc. Right? Mm-hmm. And I feel like, there's so many ways we could choose to practice, but most important of all is to have a practice that keeps us calm, thereby focusing on breath work, pranayama, long forward bends, timings in forward bends, right? These are for beginners. Upper back openers to strengthen the lungs. And we should think in terms of keeping our body strong, keeping our internal organs strong. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Large intestines go together. So things that affect the large intestine, things that affect the lungs. But we should also think in terms of keeping us focused. Now, intermediate students up, if you have a strong headstand and shoulder stand practice, that would be part of that. Mm-hmm. But to get on the mat, even if you don't do anything, I have a student who has had COVID, and just when I send out these essays to people about home practice, and she said just the fact that I said get on the mat was already extremely valuable. Get on the mat, even if you don't do anything, just get on the mat. That's my perspective. Yeah.
So we'll speak a little bit later about the teacher point of view, but if I want to quote from one of your essay, you write that Theodor Rothke, in dark times, the eye begins to see. What can we learn today about our own eye? How do we see clearly? Is this connected to the concept of ignorance in our yoga, in Patanjali's yogi? Is ignorance a narrowing of the spirit, of the heart? How do we start seeing clearly, and why and how in the dark times our eyes start to see better?
Well, let's just think about it. You could call this a dark time. No, he said in a dark time the eye begins to see, right? So we can look at this on many levels. First, we don't have so many distractions. Therefore, we have more time to settle down inside of ourselves and see what's around us. So that's one way of looking at it. The other way of thinking about it is when things seem to be coming to a close, or things seem to be coming to an end, that's when the mind becomes more awake. That's another way. He could be seen metaphorically, right? The other way is, since we are more alone, we have more time to practice, and that whole essay I wrote around that quote has to do with learning how to go inward more and observing our bodies more as we practice. Mr. Iyengar talks a lot about beauty is observation in action, right? So we have time to watch what our body is doing, how it's feeling, how it's responding. And then we also have time to see objects around us. I've given myself a little task of taking about 10 photos a day, things that just occur to me that I see out of the corner of my eye, and I'm creating a journal. I pick about 4 of them. I'm creating journal things I see, odd things that I see, how the light shines in a certain way, how a flowers come out of a plant, how this and that, you see. And then I think basically, fundamentally, he's talking about becoming more awake. Dark time presupposes the possibility of death, right? I'm going to quote another favorite poet of mine. Resky's one, Wallace Stevens is another. Death is the mother of beauty. That's a line from Peter Quince in The Gladiator. Death is the mother of beauty. What does he mean by that? At the moment when things seem the darkest, as I said earlier, that's when the light begins to come forward, right? So we should stay awake to that and think, oh, this is so boring. It's not. It's actually more exciting than ever, in a way, because we have more time to see inwardly. We have more time to see our emotions. Many people are talking about deep dreams. I work with a therapist, and I've had some very deep psychoanalytical dreams. I'm seeing more, my unconscious, those kinds of things.
I see. So being awake and being quiet, what is the relationship between being so awake because you see clearly and being quiet in your mind? So yoga is about chittavritti nirodha, about how to quiet the vibration of our mind and to be in the present moment. So how is that idea of seeing deeply in this dark time and being awake connected to being quiet?
Well, we can't. Oh, that's a very pithy question, Rahel. How much time do you have? We can't. We can't. In Krishnamurti's book, The Awakening of Intelligence, he addresses this, right? There's a difference between thought and a difference between insight, right? Thought, I'm going to call on Krishnamurti here. He says it's the past. Thought is what the past thoughts that come into the present and sort of invade the present, right? And then our mind starts churning, etc. So in that moment, you see that happening, you can come to the present. That's a little bit of a meditation technique. The minute you see that thought coming and trying to invade the present, the minute you see it, you can change. Seeing is change. But the stopping of the chattering of the mind, the yoga teacher, Rita Narodi, the stopping of the chattering of the mind is when then and only then we can have direct insight without an image. Otherwise, we're seeing everything with an image. The image being the past. And I have an image of, oh, there's Rahel. I have an image of you wearing plaid shirts all the time, as an example. So but instead of seeing that, well, is it really a plaid shirt, or is it, you have something else on, you see? So to have insight requires this quiet mind, right? And that's the only time that the direct perception can occur.
Okay. So
you can keep asking me if I didn't clarify it correctly.
So I just want to clarify that a little bit regarding the quiet mind and the quiet heart, because in my mind, when you have a quiet mind, you see your heart clearly. You see what's important to you. So what are the attitudes we should foster in this time of global crisis so that we can get to the point of seeing clearly inside, that eye that sees, and also the ability of quiet so that when we can listen to that wisdom. So there's 2 questions in my question. Am I clear?
Could you repeat them again one more time?
Okay. So when you talk about the quiet mind, you talk about being in that place of insight, right? That place of insight.
Direct perception, without an image.
Exactly.
Right.
You have insight in that moment. But in that insight, what is the connection of that insight and the quieting of your heart? Are they the same things, or are they different things? So that's one question. Second question is, how do we develop attitude to foster either one of that quieting of the heart or quieting of the mind?
If the mind is quiet, truly quiet,
Mm-hmm.
the heart is quiet. They have to go together.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
The heart is related to this is very interesting in Chinese medicine. Heart is related to small intestines, right? Heart, small intestines. One of the negative characteristics of people with small intestine problems is a constant talking. You can't get a word in edgewise, right? And when the heart is weak, it's either beating too fast, beating too slow. When we reach this state of quietude, the heart is also quiet because it's a physical condition to a certain degree. Now that's the physical heart. The entering of the mind into the heart. Now this I have to say that the goal is to be present to the other empathically without putting oneself in that presence, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to quote Krishnamurti again. He says, beauty is where the self is not, right? So the calmness of the organs, the calmness of the mind, the calmness of the heart, small intestines, all of that, the nervous system, creates a situation where we are almost like a tabula rasa, almost a blank slate. Mm-hmm. And in that blank slate, we receive the other fully, and we perceive direct perception of the other who comes into us. This is empathy, empathic, right? Yeah. Empathy is not only outward going, but it's inward going because you have become still, mm-hmm. and the person, you can receive the person for exactly as they are. Mm-hmm. Now that's entering into the heart of someone else. One's own heart, this is a more complicated question for me because where we think we've entered our heart, and then we have dreams that are very psychoanalytical. Have we worked that out? Is our heart pure? So I think the word heart has to be sort of separated out as an entity, as an internal organ, and then heart as a person who feels, empathizes, has sorrow, sadness for the world at large, right? Yeah. And I don't know how to, you want me to answer that question, but I do want to say, I want to quote, I put down, I'm going to make sure I quote this. This is Rabbi Heschel, I think that's his name, Rabbi Heschel. He says, few are guilty, all are responsible. Yeah. And I think in a time like this, we're all responsible for bringing the world up, mm-hmm. right? Yeah. Are we guilty? Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. But just to put us aside from others is a mistake. Mm-hmm. We're all one now, right? Mm-hmm. The virus doesn't distinguish, but nor does the idea that we're bringing humanity up, right? If you don't mind, I'd like to quote Dr. Rieu from Albert Camus' La Peste, the plague, where he asked, and I'm just going to look at my note, that the way to fight the plague is to live with decency. This is this doctor in the book. And someone asks the doctor, what is decency? And he says, in general, I can't say. But in my case, I know that it consists in doing my job. Mm-hmm. So as I do my job to teach my students, to show up for this, to do that, to be present, to answer emails, to be there for people who are suffering. That's as far as I can go, but that's coming from the love inside of me, right?
Mhm.
So I think this, to circle back, a calm mind presupposes a calm heart. We can't have a calm mind and our heart is racing. We can't, right? But then the metaphorical aspect of the heart is to remove oneself, to be open to others around us, to receive the sorrow of humanity and to do our job.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I have a 4 lines from a Rumi poem that I want to quote at the end in relationship to that.
So this is beautiful what you just said, and it also brings me to the question of our dharma. So to know your heart is to know what is your dharma, you need to do. What is it you need to do in this time? So that's what you're telling us with that quote of Camus about decency. But that brings me to all the question about practicing and teaching. So Judith Lasseter has been saying that I practice for my students and I teach for myself. So what is the relationship between your practice and your teaching? And has your practice changed during this time? Has your teaching changed during this time? And what does it mean for you to be of service? You know, you started talking about that a little bit when you talked about how you want to be present for your student, for your teaching. But can you elaborate a little bit about the relationship between practicing and teaching in your life at this moment?
Well, first of all, when I knew, I found out about, I was in Tampa, teaching down in Tampa, Florida, and I was supposed to teach there for 10 days. And then there was a state of emergency called, and I went home 2 days later. I came here, thought, I know nothing about this. I don't know how to do this. Someone helped me. I said, well, I can't. I've got to get better at this. No, we're going to do with what we have, she said. Very wise, good friend of mine, young woman, very good friend of mine. And I realized that if I was going to be on a screen every day, that I had to encase my practice in a way that I would stay very strong, very healthy, right? And I could project the strongest image possible to draw people towards me, right? So no day has gone by where I haven't done at least 20 to 30-minute headstand, 20 to 30-minute shoulder stand every day.
Mm-hmm.
No, one day a week I don't do it, right? Because that is what centers me the most. It's what makes my voice the clearest. It's what allows me to link my ideas together better, right? But for some reason, something about the head. I use headstand for writing too. Links right brain, left brain activity, etc. Now, how that changed my teaching is, well, with the Zoom, there's certain things you can't teach. You can't teach handstands. I mean, I suppose you could, but I wouldn't. I don't want where I can't protect my student, right? I also opened my classes in a way that primarily my Cambridge classes were for my Cambridge students, and my vacation classes were for people I teach retreats all around the world for those students. I took a 4-pronged approach. I started with floor work, and I started with alignment on the floor and with introducing breath work, right? And then things you can do on the floor twist, etc. Then I went to sitting, then standing, and then to floor work again. I started with breath work, I finished with breath work and deep relaxation. My emphasis has been alignment, breath pranayama, beginning pranayama, simple pranayama, Ujjayi, Villaloma 1, Villaloma 2, simple pranayama. Stability, we work a lot with the feet, balancing poses on our feet, right? And what did I say? Alignment, breath, stability, and then of course, well, deep relaxation, right? Mm-hmm. But the stability involved also strengthening work, flexibility, right? But a lot of my emphasis was on working with the feet in relationship with the floor. Iyengar has a fantastic quote. He says, the brain, the portion nearest the floor is the brain to understanding the pose, mm-hmm. right? And I talk a lot about that in a essay I wrote shortly after he passed away. I wrote an essay called The Man Who Planted Feet, mm-hmm. right? So I'm working a lot with even meditation in Tadasana. And that's not something I would normally do. I wouldn't start with the breath work. I wouldn't finish, right? I wouldn't start with the floor work.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So, no, thank you. This is really helpful. And I think for
all and it seems to be a structure that works because everybody keeps showing up. So
that structure is really helpful. And I think a lot of teachers in this call or a lot of students will appreciate what you just said about that. Talking about also about teaching, which is you said in one of your essay about Mr. Iyengar that what the hallmarks of his teaching was impeccability and freedom. So I understand that, and that's my understanding, and might be wrong, that impeccability regarding Mr. Iyengar means exquisite precision. So that we need exquisite precision even more in this time, and we need also freedom. So could you a little bit elaborate about this connection in this time of our pandemic?
Well, impeccability, I have to say that I got that word from Castanedas. He used that in his Don Juan books. But impeccability, I call Mr. Iyengar a precisionist, and I have never in my life met someone who, I'm talking about physical things, not in writing. Writing's a whole other story, right? Where he's so exact. His wording was so exact. His perception of the body was impeccable. I can say in some ways he didn't make mistakes in what he observed, right? And he would go deeper. The more he looked at you, he'd go deeper, right? And in that, so whenever I feel like I'm rushing through, okay, so let's bring it to my practice in this time. You know, if I feel like I'm rushing through something, I'm not paying attention. Again, I have to come back to that impeccability of observation, right? He says, observation is precision is meditation is precision in action. Meditation is precision in action, right? Mm-hmm. The Bhagavad Gita says yoga, meditation is, oh no, I'm getting mixed up, but
action.
So yoga is meditation in action. Yoga is meditation in action. He says yoga is precision in action. Therefore, precision is meditation. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
So this is a time to focus on these small details, to do things in an impeccable way. How you do one thing is how you do everything else, right? So the moment you see that you're becoming sloppy, you're not paying attention, in that moment, you can come back to that meditative state of being with what you're doing and being with this precision. That's impeccability, but that's also freedom, right? Because also being careful and precise like that also keeps the body from getting injured, right?
Exactly.
So, exactly. And an uninjured body is a free body.
Exactly. So that absolutely, I have learned it in this time that by being imprecise, I hurt myself because my mind was going somewhere else.
Too fast, you're with something else, or you're ambitious. My therapist always says, don't let your ambition get in the way of your success, right?
Exactly. So, but that brings me back to this time of uncertainty. So we are in a time of uncertainty very strongly, and maybe even a place where we are facing this so closely. We are facing our possibility of death even more than in other period of time. So in that uncertain time, how do we create tools for ourselves so that we can stay in that precision? What is needed for us to stay in that precision in those uncertain time?
Okay. It is an uncertain time, but life is also, there's a precariousness to life in general, right? There's stability and there's an instability that we must always be aware of. For example, just today, there was another earthquake in Puerto Rico. So as we are getting more stable with this virus thing, then Puerto Rico has an issue, right? So it's kind of a way of life, I wanted to say, is to negotiate uncertainty in general. I just need to put that out there. I'm sorry, but to answer your question, well, I think several of my friends who are writers, or students who are writers or painters, have told me that it's been hard for them to concentrate on their work, right? I've heard that many times. And if that's the case, because for many people who are writers, artists, their work is a way to deal with uncertainty. It's one of the practicing art, writing, music, whatever, is a way to deal with uncertainty in general. So I would say that you go back to the source, which is to come back to the body, come back to the practice. And I think maybe it might even be helpful, I'm just making this up on the spot now that I think about it, is to structure your practice. So in other words, one day you do forward bends. Another day you do twists. Or create some kind of framework for your practice. Or take 2 or 3 poses, 2 or 3 standing poses. Tease them apart. Study all the little details, right? All the details you've learned in class, all the details you know. What is the amount of the big toe doing? What's the amount of the little toe doing? Where's my tailbone? Where are my ribs doing? Work in a mirror. Now that we have Zoom, we can go on Zoom and see ourselves working on the screen, right? So the way to help us get over the distraction that's keeping us from our work that we love, like for artists, for example, or people we love, etc., is to use your yoga practice as a means to draw your consciousness towards the center of your being. I mean, even if you just sit in Upavista Konasana, I often start my floor work with that. There's an expansion of the legs, but there's a focus of the middle of the body, the middle of the nose, etc. So there's a focus in the middle, and there's an opening. You put your elbows on a block, you sit there and you just focus on that middle line, right? So I want to also, because I'm in the Iyengar tradition, it's based on alignment, and focusing on our alignment in our practice in a deeper way is another way to get into that precision, is another way to draw us from the distractions, right?
Yeah.
Krishnamurti once said, fear is only what will be, it never is what is, right? So if we, by this focus, and it's not a narcissistic focus, right? It's an intelligent, objective focus on the body. It's withdrawing oneself from one's emotions about oneself. That, all that helps. And then there are particular poses which build our concentration. I will name again, headstand, shoulder stand, incredible poses to build concentration. Pranayama. Deep relaxation for a while, yoga nidra. Also, actually, if you work on breaking down these poses and work very carefully, that, as I say, he says yoga is precision in action, therefore precision is meditation, right? All those techniques. I hope that's helpful.
That's very helpful, Karin. You can't imagine how helpful it is, certainly to me, and I'm sure to everybody listening to you right now. So that uncertainty brings me there's another question that I want to link to that. We know that in our yoga practice, in our sadhana, there is two main things that are really important. The practice, and we have been talking about the practice so much now in the past half an hour. But there is another aspect of yoga, which is the detachment, the vairagya part. So yoga is teaching us also to be, you say we need the two wings, that practice and that detachment, or you can say without color, some people translate vairagya differently, letting go. And I know that you don't like so much the concept of letting go. How do you understand this issue of detachment, non-attachment in this time? Has it changed?
Well, the only reason I don't like the expression letting go is that it's overused as an umbrella expression, like, oh, just let go, you know.
Yeah.
So letting go in a deeper sense is, let's talk about thought, right? Thought is sort of moving along like this, right? But thought is the past. Oh, I wish I had said that. Oh, I wish I had I wish I'd gotten more emails out about this program. And I was doing that to myself. It interferes in the present. Letting go, part of letting go with the past is observing how it interferes with your present moment. The moment of observation of seeing that interference is letting go. That's a meditation in action, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's number one. Number two, getting distance from things. As a writer, that's what a writer does. The writer has to have distance. The writer has to speak from the emotions inside oneself, but also it has to have distance, right? So I do find that the practice of yoga in general affords me that distance, right? I don't want to let go of my memories because I'm writing about my memories, I'm writing memoirs, right? Mm-hmm. So the letting go in that sense is, I don't want to let go because I want to write about them and study them and turn them into art, right? So letting go isn't forgetting the past. It's not allowing the past to interfere with your current meditative state of mind. That's what real letting go is. Jnana yoga, right? It's a yoga of the mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At that moment you see it doing it, you've let go. The minute you see something, you've dropped it, right?
Yeah.
So if you're having an argument with someone and then someone says, well, just let it go. The best thing is to walk away and watch how those thoughts are interfering in the moment and stay still, stay quiet. And at the moment you see that interference, the moment of seeing already creates a letting go, right? Mm-hmm. So observation creates action. Seeing something, seeing is action, right?
Yeah. No.
And then the yoga also, because the yoga does create an ability to be more in the present because it slows the mind down. It slows our metabolism down. Mm-hmm. We're naturally quiet after the practice of yoga, much more quiet than in general. I mean, the worst thing you can do is make yourself very quiet and then go out and have a latte at Starbucks, right? I would love to do that. Living in Paris for so long, I'm writing about Paris and I fantasize about going out and having a cup of coffee, but that will disturb my ability to be in the moment, right? So we also have to watch what we do with our intake, substances, extreme substances, caffeine, alcohol, etc.
So we have spoken about all the thing that the suffering, the problem of the confinement, but that the confinement is in our way to do many things, and yoga can help us being centered and find our center and work from that center and find our dharma. But also, can this period be a period of uplifting? Can this period be a period, a teacher? Can this period be a place of how do we find contentment? How do we find gratitude? So the other part of this confinement. The confinement is not only to deal with the confinement, but that confinement is a teacher, maybe, for us now. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I don't feel terribly confined because I spend a lot of time by myself,
Okay. Yeah.
right? So that's one thing. But I do miss seeing people in person. I terribly miss that. And but I think number one, we have gratitude for those people in our lives who we love to spend time with. We have more gratitude. I think, oh my gosh, I took so and so for granted. And then when this is all over and we see that person, we're just going to our heart is just going to jump with joy. So this is a kind of, what is it, restraint right now, right? But yeah, when the handcuffs are lifted, so to speak, the joy is even greater when we see people. So we have that to look forward to. The other thing is, this is a time where those of you who have any artistic endeavors, there's so much more quiet around. You can go to those. I'm pulling all my essays together. I'm trying to do more writing now, right? The other part is that I think we can learn to think about what roles people play in our lives. I was thinking about that today. We have a certain point of contact with everybody. So with one person, we have this kind of contact. With another, we have that kind of contact. Like I have a friend for whom the relationship is based around my cooking. If we spend a lot of time eating together, right? So if that person can't eat with me, there's part of the relationship that can't occur, right? But then I can also recognize, well, that's part of the relationship. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a time for us to scrutinize what roles people play in our lives, and then to develop that, or to find another form of connection. So if the cooking isn't there, what other way can I connect? Okay. I'm very moved by this quote by Eudora Welty. Very simple, 2 words: always connect, right? And so if I've lost the connection with that modality, let me find another. And that's part of the creative process of being confined, right? This opening up of new enrichment of other ways of being in relationship with other people.
So that brings me back to the power of community and what kind of community or yoga community you want to create. Because yoga there's a paradox here. Yoga is done solo, but we want a community of yogis. So we want to be connected to a community of yogis. What kind of yoga community you want to create?
Well, I've already created a community. Okay, so let's. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say.
No,
that sounded arrogant. I didn't mean that. Erase what I just said. We have the community that we've created up to this point, right? It's very important to keep that intact. Therefore, for example, in my 6 classes that I do, that I've done all year round for years and years and years, I've kept the same people in those classes. I haven't invited other people in. So you start with the small and you expand, right? So number one, we want to coagulate and pull together the small or big community we already have. Then number 2, having that foundation, we can launch forward. And what you're doing is an incredible way of doing it, Rahel. This is a wonderful, wonderful thing that you've created. Wonderful. And I think there's so many of you out there who are from Africa and Israel and France and Amsterdam, and so many I don't know you, and I want to say hi to all of you. I'm sorry that I can't say hi to you in person. So fortunately, this situation has created this expansion of community on the internet like this, on Zoom. I never did Facebook, but this I'm very interested in. Mm-hmm. And I would like to be part of any kind of expansion on this level, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that the virus has taught us, and I'm going to put a quote from Jean Genet, who said that he was talking about Giacometti's figures, and he said, the resemblance of his figures to each other seemed to me to represent that precious point at which human beings are confronted with the most irreducible fact, the loneliness of being exactly equivalent to another. Mm-hmm. The loneliness of being exactly equivalent to another. This situation has made us understand that we are all part of this event. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And therefore, our loneliness or our lack of loneliness, we're all on the same plane. And I would like to say that I think that metaphorically, it has allowed us to connect more and more to each other. And I would like to continue that.
Yeah. Thank you. So before I open it for people to ask questions, the last 15 minutes, I'd like to ask the last question from me is, what else would you like to share with us that we didn't have a chance to talk in this conversation? What do you want to leave us before I open the question? What is the thing that you want us to know about this time and the way you do and the way you understand and work with your yoga?
How much time do you have? I think the effort to continually connect. Mm-hmm. For example, some people don't want to go on Zoom, but as a teacher, I still want to stay connected to those people. This effort, this urge towards relating and being in relationship with the other is one of the most important things we can do right now. Yoga gives us the stability to have the strength to do that. We're not dealing with sickness, we're feeling good, so we have this vitality. And this vitality allows this outward flowing energy, right? I think the basis of that, but also in my writing now, I think ultimately my writing is about love. Mm-hmm. And I think the basis of all of this is about love and opening our hearts to love more and more. And so I get so busy that sometimes, like, for example, I would like to let people know more, a broader public know about my work. But I'm so busy, I can't figure out how to do it, right? But I just know as long as I keep opening up and staying in the public eye as much as possible, then I'm able to share my knowledge and be with other people. I'd like to read a poem from Rumi, one of my most favorite poems.
Yes, please do that. And then if you have a question, please raise your virtual hand so that we can spotlight you and you can ask your question. So Lisa, I don't see everybody here, but I guess if I go into this, so there are many of you, so I'm not so sure I can. So Lisa, you're going to help us with that, with a virtual hand when people, but first Karin, read your poem and then we'll open it. But raise your virtual hand if you have a question for Karin.
Okay, this poem ties in with Camus' idea of Dr. Ryu saying, for me, I know that it's involved with being a decent human being, right? I know that decency consists of doing my job. Decency consists of doing my job. He was a doctor in a hospital, right? This is Rumi. A night full of talking that hurts. My worst held back secrets. Everything has to do with loving and not loving. Yeah. This night will pass. And then we have work to do.
We have work to do, absolutely. We have work to do. So we are going to
I want to leave you with that.
Okay. Thank you so much. We'll come back at the end, but I'm going to give the audience a chance to ask questions. So do we have a question? Karen Bump has raised her hand. Would you spotlight Karen Bump, please, Lisa? Hi, Karen. Nice to see you. We don't hear you, Karen. You are muted. We don't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm on my phone and also doing video. So Karin, it's really lovely to see you. And I have a feeling that I met you way back in maybe 1994 when Patricia was doing teacher training in Somerville. So it's been a very, very long time. I have been involved in macrobiotics for the last 5 years, and I understand you have as well. And I would like to understand how macrobiotics and yoga interrelate for you. If you could speak a little bit about how they integrate, how they inform each other, how they influence each other.
Well, that, Karen, that's a long question, and I would like to invite you to email me, and we can talk a lot about that, because I'm not sure everyone knows what it's about. But what I want to say is food, eating well, is a major part of my life. And I'm vegan. I eat whole grains and organic vegetables and beans and sea vegetables. And I've been eating that way for 40 years. And eating that way allows me to work with the quietness that I feel inside through the yoga practice. They're very interlinked, because you're eating plant food that's very gentle. You're working with gentleness in the food that you're intaking. And I use food as a way to keep my mind clear and to keep my body healthy, just like I use yoga. They're two disciplines I use together. And then feel free to communicate with me more about that later, Karen. I'd love to do that. And I run many retreats where you can get both the food and the yoga. I mean, I have in the past, and we will do it in the future too. So.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Karen. So, do we have another questions? Anybody, another virtual hand? Let me see if we have.
Nancy Preston.
Nancy Preston, yeah.
Yes, hello. Okay, yeah. Hi, well, thank you, Karen, and thank you, Rahel, for this wonderful series. So, you know, Zoom has opened up so many venues for us, but it's also overwhelming. There are so many choices, both for me as a teacher, as a practitioner, and also for the students coming out there. And I'm just wondering if you have some advice how to kind of filter through that, how dealing with that on those different levels as a teacher, as a student, and then also as advising students how to deal with this, because it can be very confusing and overwhelming.
Well, I'd like to go back to what Mr. Angar used to tell us. He said, don't study with too many teachers. He basically said, just choose one and study with that teacher, right? And I think, of course, in the early days, we studied with teachers who studied with him. Patricia and I used to invite teachers in Cambridge and run workshops and things. But I would recommend you say to your students not to study with too many teachers, to choose one teacher whose approach you like and to work with that, right? Then I would also try to encourage them, again, into this home practice, so as not to be too dependent on what other people are saying, what other people are teaching. To find the knowledge within us. We have the knowledge within us. Right? So I would do that. As a teacher, of course, one could start feeling competitive. It's like you open up a grocery store and then there's 10 on the block, right? It's not any different now. You start a Zoom class, now there's 1,000 emanating from the same town, right? Just ignore it. Just do the best you can. Do the best job you can. Teach the best way you can. Try to refine, but don't over-refine your technical prowess. I try to stay a little bit cottage industry feeling. if I get too technical, then I lose myself. I want to keep a kind of naturalness to what I do. A little bit of fumbling doesn't hurt anyone, right? Because otherwise, and then I'm a star. So I don't want to be a star. I just want to do the best I can, and I want to teach the best I can. So just focus on that, and don't worry about the rest. And I don't spend my time doing anything else on Zoom unless I'm asked to come on Zoom to a conference. I don't use it for any other reason.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Karin. This is really very uplifting what you just said in this time. And I think we have another one, Daniel Levy Alvarez. Are you on?
Yes. Hi, Karin.
Hi, Danielle. How are you? It's been so
good.
long.
I know. I just want to say, in terms of perspective and memories, you taught me yoga when I was pregnant with my second child in Paris in 1974. And then life brought me to Cambridge, and here I walk in one of your workshops in 1989 or something. And now I'm in California, and thanks to Rachel, I see you on Zoom and hear your wisdom. So it's just wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Danielle. It's lovely to see you.
And that little baby, and just one more
wonderful.
thing, that little baby that you helped me bring into the world by making me relax in my pregnancy, he just became, for the second time, the father of a little girl in LA a few weeks ago during this pandemic, which is
wonderful.
so, namaste.
Oh, namaste. Thank you.
Thank you. So is there any other virtual hand that I don't see? Lisa, can you help me and see if there is any
I don't see any more.
Okay, so yes, so there was a question privately to me about the recording. There will be a recording through Zoom. We are recording this, and it's certainly available if you want to just send us an email, send me an email, and you can share it. We'll have it through Zoom, so it's going to be available for a month, I guess, something like that. So. So here we go, we're getting to the end of our session together, and I'd like to say how much, Karin, I want to thank you for your generosity and sharing with us. You have given us so much food for thought, and I knew that from the beginning that this is going to happen. Thank you so much. I also want to thank our audience, who is coming from many countries. We have many people from many countries here, and the Iyengar Association of New England, and also Artemis Yoga, for helping me to make this virtual coffee a reality. So I wouldn't be able to do that by myself. I am also pleased to announce that we're continuing. We have two next scheduled virtual coffee. On May 17, we will host Patricia Walden, Senior Advanced Yoga teacher, and one of the most dedicated students of Mr. Iyengar. She will come on May 17 at 1 p.m. And on May 31st, we will host Birju Mehta, who started his study with Mr. Iyengar when he was 16 in the 70s and now in Pune, and now is a senior teacher in Mumbai. So we'll get another perspective from India. And because of the time difference, Birju Mehta will come at 11 o'clock in the morning. So we are blessed by kind and generous teachers who are willing to share their wisdom and help us navigate this strange and difficult period. So we have to be grateful and also thankful and feel that and give ourselves a big hug because we are doing this in this time. So in this difficult period. So I hope to see some of you next time. And again, Karin, I'm so grateful that you came, and thank you very much for the audience to come. So this is it for now.
It was wonderful, Rahel. Thank you so much. You were just brilliant to put this together. And goodbye, everybody. I'm sorry I didn't get to see you in person, and I hope one day I will. And I know some of you are my students, so I'll see you online soon. All right. Have a beautiful day, everybody. I love you.
Everybody, thank you very much. Thank you for coming from Israel, from
all over the world.
All over the world. So this
so
is
beautiful.
Italy, from Mexico. I'm really impressed. Thank you so much for joining, and see you maybe next time. Yeah?
See you next time.
See you next time.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.